All right, well, hello and welcome to an author conversation. Today we have Carolyn Steele with us, and she is a native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, born and raised, and she is a member of the Tulsa Night Writers group as well, and author of several books, both fiction and nonfiction. So I'm excited to have Carolyn here with us today. And I did want to say that when you look her up online, you do need to type in Carolyn Steele with an E, because there is a Carolyn Steele author in California. So we want to make sure that we are getting our Oklahoma Carolyn Steele when we are looking up information online. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. I'm going to pop up Carolyn's website for us so that you can see where to get information about Carolyn and also then be able to reach out and connect. So this is her website, and here we have home, blog, about the author, publication, stories, and speaking program, and some links. So if at any time you want to get some more information from Carolyn, you can come here to her website, which is mcarolynsteele.com. Okay, very good. And Carolyn was just telling me that she's wanting to make some updates and make some changes on here. So look to see the website be changing perhaps in the near future. So, but all good things, all good things. So I'm going to go ahead and take us back so that we can be in conversation. So Carolyn, thank you for being here with us today. I'm very excited to be able to share your insight with my students. So first things first, if you can you tell us about you?
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm trying to get something so I can see your, there we got it. Okay. I'm very untechnical. I had to have my document rotate. I did not start out wanting to be a writer, as I think that's on my website, and more or less kind of was pushed into writing in order to keep a promise.
Okay.
As it turned out, I loved it. What I really wanted to be as growing up was an archaeologist.
Really?
And yeah, that's how we spent our vacations, was poking around caves and digging. And so this is where, and so the past is where I'm really more comfortable writing about. And I have found writing to just, I mean, it lifts you out and of the present. I think it's a good thing for a lot of people to escape to.
Yes.
It also, recently I've been working with the widows group. It's also something that can give them a release from grief, just like, on the other hand, writing can give you a release from your everyday life.
That's right. Absolutely. It's a little vacation for me sometimes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, have you ever, why everybody needs to ask, why am I writing?
Yes.
It's for me, it was to complete a promise, but also, then I found I liked it.
Right. So what kind of a promise?
Oh, my mother had written a story back in the 50s as I was a child. And I remember, in fact, this was before we have technology that we have today. Everybody had a typewriter, but you had to have carbon paper.
Yes.
And so a lot of times my mother would, she would tell the story and I would write it by hand. I still have those handwritten things as a 10-year-old child writing out for my mother.
Oh, wow.
And then we got to the point and I helped her type it. It never reached publication. Whenever she was very, very ill, she asked me to not let her story die. Now that's the story that's Spirit of the Crow. Wow. I took all those notes and all that typewritten carbon papers and I stored it under the bed. Finally, after many years, I realized that the promise was still there. It still nagged me, and I pulled it out, read it, and realized that what was written in the 50s and 60s won't pass now because it was very passive. Lots of hads and was and lots of telling, not showing.
Right.
And even though I was not a writer at the time, I was a commercial artist, and I did a lot of writing for flyers and pamphlets. That's totally different.
Yes, it is.
Totally. I knew where periods and commas went. So I started paying my dues. I started going to classes. I realized Mother's Story was about the removal of the creeks. I took Creek language, hence J, Carolyn Steele, Chahochef kiddos, so that I was learning the traditions as well as how they spoke. It took me a number, 3 or 4 years before I got to actually rewriting her story. And I rewrote it like 4 or 5 times before it got to the point. And in the process, I was entering it in contests, which, you know, I'd be glad to speak about contests as well. What happened was it began winning prizes.
Okay.
So that gives you, when you do that and something wins a prize against other people's writing, it gives you this immeasurable boost to your ego, to your belief in your writing ability. Finding publication, I really didn't work terribly hard at it. I just got lucky. Yeah. I was at a conference, Oklahoma Writers, OWFI, which is coming up in May. I can't remember. I can't remember exactly when. I'm not going to go this year, but I was on an elevator, and of course, everybody asks, "What do you write?" Well, you know, when you're there with 300-400 other writers. Right. I was on an elevator, and the woman said, "Well, okay, what do you write?" And I said, "Well, historical." "Oh, really? Tell me about it." And you have your elevator pitch.
Yes.
You know, which is your 1 or 2 sentences.
Yes.
And she says, "Well, I'm Allie Robertson with Wild Rose Press." Well, I knew Wild Rose Press, but they were primarily romance. And I said, "Oh, well, you won't be in, there's no romance in here. Let's see, I think maybe I had 1 kiss, but," and she said, "No, we've just opened up a historical imprint. So please send it to me." So I did, and they accepted it. And
wonderful.
So I felt like, okay, Mom,
there you go.
There you go.
That's fantastic. That's a beautiful story. I love that.
Oh, okay.
So many years in the making.
Yeah. Oh, yes, many years in the making. I felt like the main character, I felt like if I had to put words to it, the skeleton of the story was my mother's, but the flesh was mine.
Yes.
And so I probably would never have written this story just if I'd sat down. I learned that there were things that she had in it that would not have happened because of the traditions and the Creek people, their things. Although she was a historian, you can't, reading out of books is one thing, you know, history, actually talking and learning traditions from the actual people and the history is certainly different. And I learned that there were certain things Mother had in her story that just wouldn't have happened at the time.
Right. Wow.
And so.
Wow. That's that's amazing. So the research part is essential.
Oh, yes. I could do a whole thing on research. You know, it's not just going on the internet.
Right.
You really have to watch what you pull off the internet. Where did this information come from?
Right. I want to tell my comp students the same thing.
How accurate is it? And learning to think outside the box to get information.
Yes.
Is important.
Yes.
there's a lot of people don't think about. First of all, I will give kudos to our public library, because every time I've called their research desk, they've just bent over backwards trying to find my answer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic. That's not something that I had mentioned up to this point at all, was utilizing the library as a resource.
That's right. Mostly what we need to do is go back to original documents, but when you're writing historical, the original documents of the time give you the way people speak, their thoughts. Let's take women, for example.
Okay.
I was doing research for, I have a lot of Alaska background, and I was doing research, Wrangell, Alaska, where my people come from, has the distinction of the oldest continuously published newspaper in Alaska. So, and it's online, you can send for, I don't know, reels and play it here it all goes through the library and play it, and you're scrolling through years of, you go back to 1905. My ancestors were there in 1899 and stayed for the gold rush. Just little bits give you an insight to how people thought. And the one thing that always stuck in my mind is a little editorial at the time, and the man is writing, "I understand women are now riding like men on horses. Say it isn't true." And I thought, oh my gosh. So in other words, he thought women should ride side saddle.
Right.
Say it isn't true. So, yeah. So then you also, when you go to newspapers, which is, if we're going to do research for historical, this is invaluable, because as you are looking at the newspaper, you see ads.
Yes.
You get an idea how much things cost. I found that my great-grandfather on another side used to go out, they were up in Chillicothe, Missouri, and that's very north Missouri, can be very cold. And he would go out in the wintertime and cut ice from the river, store it in a cave. And during the summer, he would have ice on the ice wagon and go up and down the street selling blocks of ice.
Oh, wow. Was that from the Mississippi River?
No. What was the name of it? Not the Mississippi. Can't recall the name right now of the river, but apparently these blocks of ice would be, a foot deep sometimes.
Wow.
Had a cave, he'd line the cave with hay, straw, and way back in the back of the cave, well, it would always stay cool.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought that would have to be kind of dangerous work, you would think.
Yes.
Going out and chopping away ice. And
yes, it was a different world back in those days, that's for certain.
Oh, yeah. So then, that's one thing that a lot of people don't think about doing when they're doing research. Okay, I'm talking research, 100 years ago, but even research, if you're writing a story set in 1960 or something, even the more recent history will give you a lot of information.
I think that's a wonderful idea. That's not something I had thought of. And like I mentioned to you earlier, I haven't really ventured into doing any historical writing, but that's definitely an idea that I will keep in mind.
Well, here's another idea for historical research: the Sears and Roebuck catalogs. They started being published back in, I want to say 1898. I mean, they were thick.
Yes.
In fact, that not only people could not wait to get their Sears and Roebuck catalog to peruse through it, because it had literally, it wasn't just clothing.
Right.
Everything. What were the appliances that they were using? The farm equipment, toys, all of these things. And
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I have one, I can't think of the date. I should have had it at my right here on the table, but don't. If you want to, and they went up to pretty close recent times. The library has many of these. And if you call in advance and say, I'd like to, do you have for 1952, Sears and Roebuck catalog for 1952, they'll get it, they'll have it. It used to be downtown library. I don't know where that might be stored now, because you know, they updated it, and so I think some of their research stuff got parceled out to other areas, but they'll have it and you can peruse.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, I was looking for my grandmother was murdered in 1927, and I was looking for clothing of the time. I was writing a short story about it, and you find that they had day dresses. Apparently, a woman had a dress that was their day dress, and then they had their dress that they would change into to go downtown to the grocery store or whatever.
Right.
Terminology. All of a sudden, you're learning terminology that's not common now.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. And all of that from a Sears Roebuck catalog.
From a Sears Roebuck catalog, right. Another thing, if you're writing, and of course, I'm sorry, but I am giving you historical stuff.
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. Fantastic. Because they're writing a variety of storylines. So every bit of information we get is helpful.
If you're writing a story for Civil War, talk to Civil War reenactors. They are so knowledgeable. We were up in Arkansas, Pea Ridge, and I was doing research for Outrun the Bullets, which is based on a family legend. The reenactor, when he learned that I was a writer and I was doing research, he had me hold the gun. He told me about the shoes. Shoes used to be, there were no right and left shoes. They were all the same, and your foot is what molded it into right or left. But he said the main thing to know was the shoes that the Army issued were so poorly made that if you got your shoe, walk through water or anything, shoe got wet, don't take it off. Don't take it off. Because as it dried, the uppers would separate from the sole. So you will see, if you look in a lot of old paintings, a lot of times you'll look at their shoe and they'll have a rag tied around the shoe. That's to hold the upper to the sole. Because it's pulled away. So if you walk through water, you just had to leave your shoes on till they were dry.
Oh my goodness. That's a wonderful idea. And we just met a Civil War reenactor on an author interview. We can all call Rex.
Yeah, Rex. Yeah, right. They were this reenactor also was saying whenever I was explaining that this young boy, the protagonist in the story, was so young that he was sent out as a scout. For two reasons. They didn't have horses. So he was in an infantry, and he would have to, run a lot. That's how he got information back. But they said, when you take your canteen, you always filled your canteen. You always, anytime you passed a stream, even if you had water in your canteen, you stopped a few minutes to fill it, to keep it. But then you kept the chains wrapped with cloth so that they didn't make any noise, so that you could, all these little bitty things can work into your story in one way or another. You work it in so that it's not like telling, of course, but it gives flavor.
Absolutely, it does. And that goes along with, I had used a word earlier in the semester that got a little bit of blowback, but I used the word quirks.
Oh,
Not only do the characters need that little extra oomph, but
uh-huh.
your setting needs some oomph, and just ideas about your time period can use some oomph. And we'll use
Right,
perhaps instead of quirks, but those details, those little details, they matter so much.
right, absolutely. Another thought too that people might, if they're writing about something where they've not been before, go to travel books,
Uh-huh.
even old travel books, like go to Steve Sundry and pick up, because a lot of them have descriptions of the area. I
Oh,
got descriptions of Alaska from a travel book. They were talking about the Sitka spruce and this. What that does, it tends to give authenticity.
uh-huh.
So travel books, they don't have to be new and up to date. They can be old travel books that you go spend a couple of dollars for. And I like to have books anyway, because I tend to highlight them, things I never would have done before I became a writer.
Me
You
too.
highlight passages, you put little sticky notes in them.
Dog ear the pages,
Right,
right on
right.
them. Mhm. Absolutely. I like,
Historic.
yes.
Another thing is historical societies in the town that you have your story set in. And this could even help in modern day, because just a blurb or two about the old building, that it was said that a murder was committed there, such and such and such, and the Gothic this, that, and another.
Yes.
The historical societies all have all that kind of
That's
information.
a wonderful idea too. I mean, like you said, I'm glad that you said even for modern day, what a great idea. If we are picturing a particular area in our heads for our stories, to contact
Mhm.
the tourism place, the historical society, and ask some questions and get that little bit of butter to put on your toast.
Absolutely. And all it may add too is one or two sentences, but those one or two sentences do so much, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Another thing is museums. Small towns especially have the neatest museums, because they'll be all about the area as a rule. Sometimes there's a museum up in Wichita that actually has an Egyptian mummy.
Right.
Who would have known it, you
Right.
know? So the the looking for other than your internet,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
you just got to spend the elbow grease and the time.
Mhm.
And if unless you are writing about a story set in New York City, and even then, there's things that you can find without going to New York City.
Right. Right. I think that's all wonderful information. It's setting is so vitally important. We have to get setting correct.
Mhm.
And I think it's easy for us to forget that we have it in our heads. And
Mhm.
especially once we've done the research, we have it in our heads. But
Mhm.
can the reader experience it? Can the reader understand it the way that we do? And that's we have to really concentrate on what we're putting.
My biggest problem in writing is, first of all, I'm a comma person, so but it's the misplaced pronoun.
Mhm.
You were
Oh,
speaking about, we have it in our head, we know who we're talking about,
yes.
but we
Yes.
have to keep in mind that the writer doesn't always know. They lose track of who this she or this he belongs to.
Yes. And it's very easy for us to neglect that when we are writing. Very easy.
Right,
Yes,
right.
I see that with my comp students a lot as well, even in their nonfiction essays. They misplace pronouns, and I will say, who are you referring to? I'm unclear what we're talking about here. I'm not sure what that or it refers to. I need you to make this clear.
Mhm.
For the same
Echoes,
applies.
echoes, finding echoes to echoes always, and you'd be surprised, even published books will have echoes in them. And then there's the purposeful echo. but for the
Right.
most of the time, they're not.
Right.
Here's another thought that someone may not actually think of: children's books.
Uh-huh.
Children's books are written about literally everything under the sun, especially historical. If you want to know what a Union soldier wore, what he had in his backpack,
Right.
all of these things you can find a children's book for,
Yes.
the library, and or go to Steve's Sundry.
Yeah.
No. So I have a lot of children's books that mostly for clothing and that sort of thing are so helpful.
That's a great idea. I would not have thought of that.
Yeah, look, think outside the box.
Yes, I like that. Oh my goodness, it's wonderful. Because I've been telling the students, look things up online. To step
Well,
outside.
and that's not bad advice. That is, you find so much online. The problem with that is you do need to make sure of the source.
Yes, verify its authenticity.
Verify its authenticity. Absolutely.
Yes, because there's a lot online that's not
Right.
accurate.
Right. And
Shocking, I'm sure everybody wants to believe if you saw it on the internet, it's true.
No. I wish.
Right.
How easy it would be to write then.
Right, exactly.
I had a good friend, Derek Bullard. He is a publisher of little boutique books, mostly religious tracts. But he had a story that was set in Denver, and it was set, I want to say, back in the 30s and 40s, that era. And all of a sudden he came up with a problem that how did this character get from point A to point B if he didn't have a car? And he goes online and he finds the bus schedule.
Oh, yes.
For that era.
Yes.
And it was someone selling it. They had printed bus schedule. They had a map of Denver, an old map and a printed bus schedule. And he was able to, come up with that information. Okay, so how bad would it have been if he'd been incorrect?
Right.
Teresa, I think it's Teresa Wright, used to have, she had a story, and I cannot remember the name of her novel, but in it, one of the characters goes fishing, and he comes back and he has catfish, and they're scaling the catfish. Well, as it turns out, catfish don't have scales. And she didn't, it was printed. She said when it was reprinted, she didn't change it because she got so many people commenting and writing her to correct her that catfish don't have scales. So, but your readers will catch those things.
They absolutely will.
What somebody said, if a reader catches something that's just wrong, for them, it throws the entire story in doubt. Yes, and all of a sudden, they lose that little spark when they're reading it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The magic's gone. It's no longer a world that they can exist inside because they've seen a flaw.
That's right. That's right. I am amazed at people. Of course, I'm historical. That's where most all my stories are set. But I'm amazed at people that can build worlds and set their story in the future.
I find that to be terrifying.
I did a short story that it's published in the Tulsa Night Riders Behind the Mask. It was published last year. The Night Riders all contributed stories. And I said it all had to be about pandemics, COVID. So I set my story, the archaeologist that I would love to have been, in the future, 200 years from now. And said all the stories, they're going back, trying to find all the people that were put in mass graves and that sort of thing. Yeah, in caves.
Right.
And I thought, this is so hard.
That's so fantastic. So when the Night Riders do an anthology collection like that, is there often a theme?
No, not. There was one year, it's called Shades of Tulsa. The theme all had to be stories that occurred in Tulsa.
Oh, wow.
This past anthology all had to be stories that revolved around pandemics,
Okay.
diseases.
Right.
Because we had the very big pandemic in 1918, where so many people died.
Right.
And I think we've had a lot of comparison of COVID compared to 1918, the influenza of that era.
It would be fascinating to pick up a copy of that. I was a part of a collection called Phopocalypse, and it was the writing group that I was in. And then we also made it global. And so we have authors from all around the world in that collection. But it's the end of the world's coming, the comet's coming towards Earth, and everybody,
oh my gosh,
in chaos. But then it disintegrates upon entering the atmosphere and it's gone. And so the world has been preparing for this, and then it doesn't happen. And then how do you get back to normal? So all of our stories had to be about how do you get back to normal after the end of the world was upon us. And then it didn't happen, but it was a very violent threat of imminent doom, and then it's gone. And so if you can imagine the utter chaos that would have been existing on the earth before, and so we all wrote about how did these people get back to normal. And mine was the final story, because I set it 10 months in the future. All the babies that came. And so it was a young woman going into labor in this new world where everyone's still trying to come to terms with a new way of life because everything had changed. And so it was a fun opportunity to collaborate with my writing friends and to working on stories that then we fit into the sandbox. So that's a fun thing to do.
And for a lot of people, they need that. They know they want to write, but they're struggling with getting that writing idea. Something like that already gives you part of the story. And it's up to you.
That's another reason to be involved in writing groups. Hint, hint.
Oh, yeah.
My students, because you have the opportunity to get involved in these different types of anthology projects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that this is, I felt like this anthology, the Behind the Mask, was an attempt to hold the group together when we couldn't meet anymore. And not everybody is technologically able to go in on Zoom. I know your young people are going to think, oh, who can't do that?
Yes. Right.
So, because I'm just a dinosaur. I can't imagine writing now like we used to write back. For example, my mother. Can you imagine writing back there? Now, when these typewriters came out that you could go back and delete something or change a word.
That was when I was in college.
Oh, that was such a novelty. I mean, it's such
amazing.
Now, can you imagine writing without a computer? I mean, you can move whole paragraphs, you can delete, you can add, you can change. I just can't.
And you have editors, in your program. Like Microsoft Word now has added in a thing that they just call editor, and it gives you a grade, and it shows you all the things that need corrected, and so you can just click on them, each one, and decide if you want to make those changes or not, and your score. And it's just like, this is wild. I have for my Comp 1 classes in their syllabus, I have an entire, in the introductory material. So on my PowerPoint presentation, I have an entire slide that has a picture of an old typewriter, the kind that I learned to type on. And I do this whole spiel, I walked 5 miles in the snow uphill backwards without shoes kind of conversation about when I was in school. I had to write on this typewriter, and if I made mistakes, I had a little bottle of liquid paper, and I would have to scroll the paper up.
Oh my gosh,
Put the liquid
yes.
paper on it and then wait for it to dry. And I was always too impatient to wait for it to fully dry. And so then you would scroll it back down and type over it again. And then you would hope that you got it just centered just in the right spot so that it typed in the right place. And it was so like, and it was with grammar, it was, did we know it or did we not? It was, you had to know it. And I find that students more and more and more, it's like the more technology we have, the lazier our minds become. And
well,
less understanding the grammar rules.
That's what they were talking about, calculators. You know, it used to be the old time accountants, they were doing it, you know, by hand, by brain, you know. They were figuring percentage. Now we just put in our numbers and click it. So yeah, our brains are lazier now, for sure. We used to be, if we had a word and we found it, it echoed, okay, I need a different word. You had to pick up your thesaurus or whatever, and go and find the other word for it. Now we just kind of click something and it comes up right there on the screen and you scroll down. Yeah, we had it's made us lazier. I have to agree.
That's what I say. That's straight up what I say. And I see the results when it comes time to grade papers, because I will say to them, I don't understand how you can be okay with turning in something that is just full of grammatical mistakes when you have the internet. I didn't have the internet when I was in school. Like, it was legitimately, did I know it or did I not? And it just trips my mind out. Like, because back in the day, we had to be skilled in order to effectively write.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think that this is personal opinion, and your young people probably will disagree, but I think text messaging has done a lot to dumb down. People they don't capitalize things that should be capitalized. They don't bother to go in and put periods and commas and all of that. You
absolutely
abbreviate words.
Yes.
We're not going to know how
that aren't supposed to be abbreviated.
Right.
Absolutely. No, I say that directly, straight up in class. I'm a big proponent for let's keep the English language appropriate, shall we? You know, and it's not just in the text messaging too, it's in the memes that they're into using all over social media. And whoever the meme creators are out there in the meme world, you know, they don't spell right, they don't use good grammar. And I have a whole PowerPoint where I just have a whole bunch of memes that are all bad. And, you know, and I make that point, if we just are getting our grammar rules from these things, we're in trouble. We are absolutely in trouble.
And not only that, but if you hope to be published.
Yes.
Because the publishing world still goes back on that you have to have complete sentences.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, grammar has to be right.
Yes.
In other words, you have to pay your dues.
Yes.
You have to learn the proper way to do this, that, or another. Kind of like entering contest. If you don't read the instructions and follow them completely, I don't care how good your story or whatever you're entering, your poem is, it's not going to place.
That's right. You have to follow the directions, because it can be, like you said, the entire story can be fantastic. It could legit be the best one there. But if your format's incorrect.
I learned, of course, I always learn things the hard way, but I learned, I had, this was an OWFI contest. It was in the young children's contest entry. And I get it back. And of course, the thing about OWFI entering their contest is you are pretty much guaranteed a critique.
That's wonderful.
That is the big deal about entering, to me, is getting someone that's not related to you, doesn't know who you are.
Yes.
So they're not trying to watch your feelings or anything. They're telling it to you straight up.
Right.
She says I wanted to place this story. It was so good, but you didn't follow the directions. And I'm going, I didn't follow the directions. I go back because it was a children's thing. I had to put the age range up at the top on the front page. And I hadn't, I put the word count,
Right.
but I didn't put the age range. So I thought, okay, here's a chance that I could have had a place.
Right.
And I didn't.
Right. Oh, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. Well, we all learn by our mistakes, hopefully.
Yes. Hopefully so. That's honestly, sometimes that's the best way to learn.
Well, and another thing about contest, you have to realize that not everybody's going to love what you wrote.
Yes.
I entered a contest one time that had 4 judges. I had to send in 4 manuscripts and 4 judges. They judge, most judging is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each thing carries it, did was the title appropriate, the type of thing.
Right.
I got a 10 on 3 of them. And one judge didn't like something in the story, and which brought the total down, the total score down. Right. And so it didn't win first place. And so I learned by that, it wasn't anything that I did that was wrong in this case. It was that you are not everybody is going to love your writing.
That's right.
Your mother is, but
right.
Anybody else will.
That's the truth. And we have to learn to be okay with that.
That's right.
We had an author that we were reading from earlier in the semester, Chuck Wendig, and in one of his main points, he says, we have to develop a thick exoskeleton, an authorial exoskeleton, he said. And I love the way he worded that, because you have to be prepared for all of the darts and all of the arrows that come at you from critics. They're going to happen. They're absolutely.
And sometimes they're not. I don't know how many people may have read Dusty Richards. He was a very prolific Western writer, probably 50 or 60 titles to his name. And he was talking, he was very helpful to me in the very beginning. And we were talking at a conference one time, just sitting and having coffee. And he said, we were talking about contest. And he said, yes, he had judged a lot of contests. He says, he said, the flame of creativity is very fragile and it doesn't take much to blow it out.
Wow.
And it's in that, isn't that fantastic?
Yes.
And so he said, I always try, if I'm going to critique,
right.
I always try to realize that I don't want to crush anybody's creativity.
Right.
So
I'm writing that down. It doesn't take much to blow it out.
Yeah.
And that was Dusty Richards.
Dusty Richards. Yes.
That is lovely. And it's the truth. It doesn't, we are so fragile. We, the authors, are fragile in our feelings.
Well, we have to, like your author saying, build up a hard exoskeleton. We have to learn, not everybody's going to, our words aren't golden.
That's right. They're not, they're not studded with diamonds, all of them.
That's right. So.
As much as we'd like to think they are.
Right. Absolutely. So.
It just doesn't work that way. And we don't all like the same genre, and we don't all like the same quirks, and we don't all like the same this and the same that. And
for example, I'm never going to write about vampires. And I know that was, at least it was for a long time, a very big genre, was that vampires and
yes.
It's just not my world.
No. I'm probably not going to venture away from very character-driven stories. I'm very into character-driven stories that delve into relationships between people. I love the psychology involved in how relationships alter and change lives and change course paths. And so for me, it's not about this big overarching plot story. It's about the internal in relationships. That's what I tend to write about more than anything. So yeah, no vampires. Unless they're very interesting vampires and it's just like two of them and they're on a journey and they're,
they're fighting.
right. That I can get down with it. But for it to be like this epic kind of thing, that's not my writing style.
Well, you're glad that there are people who do that like this big variety. Yes. It would be kind of dull if nobody ever read anything but one genre.
Absolutely. Well, it's been interesting to me too, because absolutely every person that I have had the opportunity and been blessed to interview in this way, we all have a different writing style. We all have a different genre that we lean towards. And that's been fascinating for me as well, to get to be talking with all of you and to focus.
Yeah, and you can learn something from every genre though.
Yes.
Too.
Yes. Absolutely. When I was talking with Joshua Danker-Dake, he was really talking a lot with science fiction and crime drama, that you have to have an outline. You have to be structured. You have to know in advance where your story is going, so you're not missing any plot hole, or you're not having plot holes along the way. And I was like, oh, that sounds horrifying.
Well, you're either a pantser or you're an outlier.
That's right.
And I always have the general outline. I know how it probably needs to start, and I thought I knew how it needed to end. My publisher on Outrun the Bullets said, I love the story, but you didn't end it in, we need to have another chapter because you left your character out in the wilderness, so I had to write another 2 chapters, as it turned out, and I liked it so much better. And I thought, okay, my publisher knew best.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. Well, I just had them do an assignment where they had to form a focus group outside of school and present their ideas for their writing project and get some feedback. Talk about your characters, talk about your plot, talk about these different things and get some feedback from people. What do they think of where you're headed and your ideas and everything? And some of them had some like mind-blowing experiences, because when you get the opinions of others prior to having it in front of an editor, you can ward off some of that. When you get to a later stage and the editor's like, well, you need to change this, but perhaps you could have caught that prior if you had like a writing group, a critique group.
Right. Yeah. Let's see, I thought I had ended it. The character was out of danger, but they wanted more because there was another character that was left behind. They wanted to know what happened to him.
Isn't that interesting?
It just didn't. So the last 2 chapters of Outline the Bullet were written after the story had been accepted.
Wow.
And
wow.
So I am more of a pantser. I know how to begin it. I think I know how to end it, and what kind of needs to happen in the middle, and the outlining, to me, I never stuck to it.
Right.
So yeah.
Pantsers are us.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. We need the plotters.
And if you're having trouble with story ideas, surely all these young people have heard something in the past. Maybe they had a great grandfather that was a bigamist, or maybe they had and went and disappeared, and what happened to the family after they disappeared. All kinds of things.
What I have done recently is my 22-year-old daughter is really into ancestry research. And so she's been on Ancestry.com for a while. And so I thought, well, I'm going to check it out too. And I got on there, and it has been amazing, the documentation that you can find about your great grandparents, like news articles. And as you've been talking about these things, I've been thinking about just different information I've been finding about my family history. things I had no idea about. And it's been a pretty amazing thing. So Ancestry.com is a great resource as well.
Looking at, for example, Alex Haley's roots, that was all he knew, was his ancestor was referred to as the African.
Really?
And as he got older, he began researching, looking for, census records, all the ancestry type research that you do. And from that grew this monumental book.
Right.
That made him a lot of money.
Yes, it did.
Made him famous.
Right. That's true. And it starts with an idea. And what a great place to look for ideas is just dig into your own family history.
You can either make it totally fictional, or you can go the nonfiction route. Fictional usually is probably a little easier to sell.
Right.
But if you look at Michael Wallace, I mean, all of his books are nonfiction, and they're all fantastic books.
Yeah.
And, and that's a whole nother subject, is making something nonfictional, making it interesting.
Right. Because you do take those elements of the creative writing and put them into nonfiction. So that
absolutely.
It's the reason.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I was going to just say, I did on Ancestry, I'm stuck on this. I got to get it out of my head. But I did just recently discover that a great grandmother of mine died on the passage overseas. And so then the great, I can't remember exactly how far back it goes, but she died on the passage overseas, and he remarried almost as soon as he got to New York.
You probably had kids, and you had to have somebody. And that was the thing too, widows or unmarried women, what was their option? Because what could they work at other than cooks and maids and that sort of thing?
Right.
Life was a lot harder for women back then.
Absolutely. So dig into your own family history, talk to your grandparents, get some information, find out what was going on back then, because there are fascinating ideas, and you can even take some of those ideas and translate them to more modern stories, or perhaps even futuristic or dystopian, where you're just like making up your own time period.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, there are lots of books out there that you could refer to. Elizabeth Street, written by Lori Fabioso, was because her great-grandmother had gone against the Black Hand, which was a gang. And this Elizabeth Street was a street that all the Italians lived on, in New York.
Wonderful.
And so there she took, and she fictionalized it. I have to say, my book, Outrun the Bullets, is fictionalized, although it's based on a true story. But what can you do then? You can put based on a true story.
Correct.
Even if you fictionalized it, that's this certain thing. Because of course, if it's in history, you weren't there to hear their conversations.
Right.
So.
Right. Oh, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I'm looking forward to digging into that myself. Your Outrun the Bullets. I want to know what that's all about. That's fascinating. The title itself is enticing. So well done on that title. That's
okay. And I will confess, I'm not good on titles. That was my editor.
Wonderful.
I had it the race or something like that, Abby's Race, and she said no, that isn't gonna do. No. So I had to put brain matter there and try to figure out a catchy title that yet still gave you an idea. How many books? Yeah, how many books have you picked up and you thought, well, where did they get this title from? So.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant title, because I immediately want to know what that's about. Immediately.
Well, and you don't have to have someone that had this fabulous true, I have a lot of really interesting background, Gold Rush and Civil War and stuff, but also the Late Sooner by Sally Jadlow, I think it is. All she had was she had discovered a great-great-grandfather's diary, one line entries every week or so, and he was a late Sooner to Oklahoma.
Late Sooner.
Yeah. So researching these one line entries, what did he mean by this or that? And she crafted the story, and he didn't manage to make it. He lost the farm, had to go back to Missouri, but it was the struggle,
Right. Right.
So just don't think, oh, I don't have anything interesting in my background. You can make research.
Yes.
Takes the ordinary into the extraordinary.
Well, I think that when we take and we really dig into the authenticity of ourselves and our stories, and we're truly honest with those crazy, wild thoughts that we have and we know other people have had, just about any storyline can become interesting and relatable to the experience.
Yeah. Just consider it a challenge.
Yes, and start asking questions.
Yeah.
Start talking to people.
I gave a speech to, can't even remember the name of the school over in Oklahoma City one time. And I said, challenge them. I said, take that story of whatever ancestor you heard, or even your parents, and write it up and give it to them at Christmas time. They would rather have that than anything you could have gone out and bought for them.
Yes.
And that you put down the story. You become the storyteller.
That's right.
Used to be kids grew up, everybody talking at the table, big Sunday dinners when family came over, or after dinner, everybody sat on the front porch because nobody had air conditioning. The kids played around under the shade tree, and they heard stories about when Grandpa fell down the well and he was so mad because nobody came looking for him for 2 days, type of thing.
Right.
So we used to hear those things. We don't hear them now,
Right. We don't take the time to sit down and listen either. I think one of my favorite stories that my dad ever tells is his older brother, who's 3 years older than him, convinced him that a sheet worked like a parachute, and took a box up on the roof of the house here in Tulsa. And he had my dad get into the basket and hold this sheet in the basket, and Uncle Donnie pushed him off.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it didn't fly.
It didn't fly. Fell like a rock, did it?
Well, it's really kind of crazy because he's having back issues now in his late 70s that directly correlate back to that incident.
Yeah, that hard fall.
But that story, I love that story, the way he tells it. So, when we ask questions and we listen to stories from days past, we can get such beautiful insights into people and life before technology. And we can take those stories and put them into today's world. But it's nice to get the more realistic, like this is life without technology. These are things that actually occur and go on between people, because I think we're losing some of that now.
Oh, we're losing a lot of it. Yeah. There's hope. There's
always hope. And we'll keep writing stories about authentic people because we are driven to. And
yes, that's right. That's right.
We want them to have that experience and
well,
give a reader something to lose themselves in.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the people that have stories that they just can pluck out of thin air. I have to be kind of gigged or something to be able to craft my story.
Yes, my youngest son, that child, he's the youngest of 6. I have 6 children, so he's the youngest of 6, and he is an incredible storyteller. And I tell people before you meet him, just put on a seatbelt, because within a 10-minute time span, He's going to start talking to you about his day, and within 10 minutes, he's the emperor of the world. Like, it's just, and every bit of it's believable. You're not going to question him while he's telling the story. And then at the end of it, you go, wait a minute, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And I'm honestly jealous. I'm jealous of his ability to just grab your attention and pull you in and cause you to believe anything he says.
Well, you hear people say, oh, I was standing in line at the grocery store and I heard this woman, and I thought that would make a great story.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, huh? I have never heard anything I wanted to write a story about, from the lady standing behind me yelling at her kid or talking on the phone or whatever. But some people have the ability to.
Yeah. I will see like a road rage incident on the highway. I try to retrain my brain. I've tried to retrain my brain to always be thinking that there is a story happening in every single car on this highway.
That's right.
And so, a story idea could even come from a situation like that, where this car just like cuts you off.
Mm-hmm.
And you see two heads in the car, and you can tell that one's raising hands,
Mm-hmm.
So then to let your mind wander, like what's happening in that car, it can become a kidnapping. It can become, a woman in labor. It can become any kinds of things. And you can describe what you see them doing with their car on the highway.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And let that grow.
Absolutely.
We could do an anthology just about Highway 169.
Absolutely.
And the things that you see fly off of trucks. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, I'm thankful that I don't have to drive. My grandson drives 169 all the time. And I'm just in dread that I'm going to get the phone call that he's been in an accident. Mm-hmm. Somebody's cut him off. Somebody.
Right. 169 is bad. Sorry, Tulsa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. It is.
And then my children, when I complain about Tulsa traffic, my children who grew up in St. Louis will be like, Mom, remember?
Yeah,
oh.
Yeah.
Tulsa's not so bad.
Well, I remember when 169, it wasn't that busy, but now it's just bumper to bumper. How did that happen overnight? Same way with Broken Arrow. How did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. It just did. Before you know it, everything just.
That's right.
It's on us. Look at us, Carolyn. We've been talking an hour and I never even asked you about the writing process that you use.
Oh, like when do I get up and write? Do I write at 3 o'clock in the morning?
And how? Like what works for you?
What works for me is you've got all this research in your brain if you have researched something, and it's just a matter of just sitting down and starting with that first sentence. If you can get that first sentence or two, keeping in mind that the beginning of any story, short story, novel, whatever, you have to have the who, what, when, where.
Yes.
You don't want and you start putting in, making sure you haven't left the reader out in left field.
Right.
So it was a dark and stormy night,
It's not interesting.
What I heard,
Right.
So yeah, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. Like I said, I always have how I think it needs to start, what needs to happen, and how it ends. And oftentimes it doesn't turn out how I initially envisioned it.
Right. Me too.
Because it's as you're writing, something kind of niggles you and says, that wouldn't have happened, or she wouldn't have said that, or, type of thing.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you try to do a certain amount of writing a day, or?
No, I may go several days that I never ever even get into my office. And then when I do, I'm usually there all day long. because it's once you get started, you hate to. I want to. And I think there is something to this. I've heard authors say, I always have the sentence to the next paragraph. I always, where I'm going to end it, so that I sit down and my brain picks up right away. They always try to leave it like on a hook or something.
Oh, that's a great idea. I have, but the project that I'm working on right now, I've been finding I have to go back and read a few pages to get myself where I need to pick up.
Yeah. Yeah. And also they say, don't do this. They say, I don't know anybody that knew Peggy Feuling. She always said, just get the story out there. Just vomit it onto the screen. Just get the story there. Don't go back. Yes. And I wish I could do that. But I'm typing away and I'll think, oh, no, that doesn't sound right. I got to go back and correct it then. I wish I could go ahead and just get the whole story down and then go back.
Yeah.
But
I use that same terminology. I tell the students, you've got to word vomit.
Yeah, just get it out there. And then you go back and make your corrections and change things around. I wish I could do that. I can't.
I know.
I got to fix it right.
I think
or what I think is right at the time.
The more and more I talk to different authors, the more I realize I think I'm one of the founding members of Pantsers R Us. For me, it's just very fluid. Like I have an idea. I know my characters. Know my characters, but I have an idea where it's going. Just kind of.
It helps. Like Outrun the Bullets started out as a short story, and then it built, and I realized it's a novel.
Right.
And it has, after you get started in it, you do well to go ahead and sit down and say, this character, and this is about these characters, have the at least an outline of what your character is like.
Right.
And,
absolutely.
And go, yeah.
Yes. That's the one thing that I am very structured with is my characters.
Yeah, because you can get them confused after a while. Outrun the Bullets, there are 4 brothers, and the protagonist is the youngest brother, who has to contend with the other 3 brothers telling him what to do. And so you want each one of those brothers to be their own character. Yes.
Yes.
And so you have to keep them straight.
Right. Absolutely. So that's got to be definitely fleshed out.
Particularly if you've got a lot of characters in your story. I just got finished reading, or didn't, just a month or so ago. It's takes place, it's a Canadian writer, but her story took place in Paris. There were so many characters that after a while I got a piece of paper and wrote them down on what page they first appeared on, because I was having trouble keeping them straight. So I doubt that I ever will have a story that has very many characters in it, because if you're reading and you can't keep it straight, how can you write and keep them straight?
Well, obviously not. Yeah, you absolutely have to manage the number of characters that you have.
Yeah, and I can see where outlining, especially if you are writing futuristic science fi and that sort of thing, I can see where outlining is probably the best way to do it.
Absolutely. Fantasy worlds, things of that nature, you've got to have that completely lined out.
Yeah, because believe me, your reader will pick up a mistake.
Oh, yes.
They just do. They just do.
And they don't like the mistakes. Stephen King has a short story in the Night Shift collection that I read to my comp classes every semester. It's The Man Who Loved Flowers. And I love it. It's a beautiful story. It starts out very romantic. Like, you start reading it to students and they're like, is this a romance? Did you say Stephen King? What are you reading?
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. But there's a line in it that every single time I read it, it's nails on chalkboard to me. Like, I would like to say, Mr. King. fix this. But the line is, he loved to see her eyes light up with surprise and joy when he brought her a surprise.
Oh, echo, echo, echo. Surprise and joy when he brought her a surprise.
It's terrible.
Why didn't that editor catch that?
I don't know, but every time I read it, I'm just like, oh. And the first time I read it, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
That's bad.
And you haven't gotten used to it yet. Yeah, it is. That was bad. It really was.
Isn't that, I mean, surprising and shocking, but it's one of the first short stories he wrote and had published. So we'll forgive him.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. And you'd be surprised how many young people, Stephen King is their favorite author. And he is a good writer.
My comp class is completely centered around his writing and Night Shift, the collection Night Shift, just because I want to do something different.
Yeah.
Throw them off kilter a little bit when they get into the class. We're not going to do the things that you're dreading. You know, most students, they're just not interested in reading The Great Gatsby again. And they're just not interested in, and I get that. So let's do something completely different. And then they go, oh no, he's scary. No. He writes a wide variety of genres. So bear with me, you know, it's a lot of fun, but I want to be able to do multi-genre as well. But I find that I'm much more just character driven, literary focused. No matter what I try, I did try to do like a spy novel kind of, but it still ended up coming right back to character.
See, I've always thought about people that can write murder mysteries and things, and I think, oh, how clever!
Right.
I am not that smart to write a murder mystery or a spy novel or a thriller. I don't know. I've never tried it, but
well, okay. So there's the rub right there, is you've not tried it.
I guess you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So maybe you should try it now.
Oh, yes.
Challenge laid.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is fun, and that's another fun thing is challenging yourself and trying to write.
Yeah, right.
Something that feels daunting.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
I have a collection of short stories that I haven't tried to get published yet, but it's all set on the removal of the creeks. And each story is a standalone story, but sometimes characters will cross into another short story. And all of those stories have pretty well come to me. One of them, the very first one, I dreamed it, you know, and I woke up with this story in my brain. Wow. So I'm probably influenced a lot by research, and I don't realize it, but it plants a seed.
Yes.
And then that seed, you know, kind of comes to life, and you sit down and write.
Yes.
About it.
Yeah. I think the things that we're supposed to write, they come to us and they stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it may be years, like with you, with The Spirit of the Crow, before you actually get to it.
It was always there. First of all, on that story, I grew up with that character, the main character, No Chance. I grew up with him. I mean, Mother talked the story. It was just the two of us. Mother talked the story, and TV wasn't like it is now. I mean, you can flip on the TV and find something to watch every time. Back then, there were like 2 channels.
Right, you know? Right.
So people did a lot more imagination and stuff. Yes. And, you know, agreed. I don't know that people do this anymore, but we'd take a quilt and go out and lay in the backyard and watch the sky and wait for UFOs, you know. And in the meantime, we would talk, Mom and I.
Right.
So she
would
that's
talk wonderful.
About, what do you think if I had such and such? Oh, I don't know, Mom.
Right.
So so that story is the story that lived with me for a long time.
I think that's beautiful. I'll be excited to pick that up and read it.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah. Be excited to do that. Well, do you have any final writing advice? Something that you just feel that especially new writers need to know?
Yes. And it's probably nothing that they haven't already heard from you, but to follow the grammar. And if you have a story, even if you think, if nobody else says, oh, nobody's going to be interested in that or anything, if you have a story that's in your brain, in your psyche, whatever, write it.
Yes.
Regardless what anybody else says.
Yes.
But then realize that your words aren't golden, that you probably have made mistakes,
Yes.
and everybody makes mistakes. So don't let it hurt your feelings.
That's right.
Just go with it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Be a big girl. Be a big boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We are not perfect. Shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. You have good big shoulders. Take all that criticism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And give it some contemplation.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I'm going to tell you right now, on contests, there are some judges that are just plain out mean. So
that would be a great way for all of us to venture into a world of accepting criticism, is by starting to enter some contests and run into those meanies. Because
it first of all, if you place, and to me it's first place is the most exciting, let's put that, but any place,
yes,
gives you some kind of validation.
Yes.
And let's face it, if all we ever hear is this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right, then it does tear us down. And I would definitely, unfortunate thing about contests is usually it costs something to enter. Mm-hmm. OWFI, I don't know how much it cost now, whether it's $20 or $30, but you can enter, and they've got like 30 different categories. And right. For that one entrance fee, you can enter a bunch of categories.
That's fantastic. And you can kind of look at it as, this is an opportunity for me to get some feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's how can you know how you need to grow or what you need to work on if you're not willing to get that feedback?
Yeah. Plus, we know the story so well in our minds. Sometimes we're not aware that we're not getting it across for the reader to know.
Yes.
And a good critique. And as I say, the critique is from people that don't know you, because it's always blind. Your name isn't on your work. These people don't know you, so they're going to give you honest, supposedly.
That's right. I got to just be for the student contest for the Tulsa Review, which is TCC's literary magazine. I got to be one of the reviewers for the student contest.
Oh,
all anonymous. I had no idea who wrote what, and it was fun. It was fun to get to go through those and to judge them. Yeah. And then I had to wait for the list of the winners, and it was the one that got first place. I went, yeah.
That was right.
It was surprising, it was shocking, it was funny, it was
Was it more than one judge to a piece then?
Yes, we had a panel.
So the panel everybody on the panel read the same stories, and then it's a accumulation. That's always good. That's always good.
And it was blind. I don't know what any of the other judges did. So we each read through the submissions and then submitted our results individually.
Well, supposedly OWFI gives you back, you do get a score sheet, but then they'll give usually a little personal
I love that.
blurb, and I think that's very helpful.
I'm excited. I'm ready to, I am coming to the meeting, and I'm
Okay, well, tomorrow night I will be pleased to meet you in person.
Yes, I'm super excited.
Okay.
I mean, I was in a writing group in St. Louis for a long time. And then it disbanded for a reason. And then some of us stayed in touch over the years. And then I ended up moving to Tulsa. And I just have not, I mean, I know other writers and I talk to them some, but I went through some really traumatic days in my own life. And so I kind of pulled back from writing. But I'm ready.
Well, we have, and it's true, we have times at which I think every writer has times at which they're more motivated than other times.
Yes.
You just
Yes.
are, you
Yes.
know.
Well, it was almost like the time period that I was going through. It was just story being built, story being built, and that emotional palette of my own was getting stretched. And now on the opposite end of all of that, I'm like, wow, so much fodder, so much fuel now in my arsenal of words. And so that's kind of exciting, and I'm ready.
Yeah.
Ready to get connected and jump into the deep end of the pool again.
Well, I wish I had some big words of wisdom other than to say that, no, I don't have any particular schedule. Chuck Sasser wrote a lot of adventure stories, but he was very strict. He got up at 4 o'clock every morning. He wrote till like 8 o'clock, then he stopped, ate breakfast, went out, fed his horses, came back in and wrote for another few hours.
Wow.
And I'm not that dedicated, I guess.
But that doesn't mean you don't love it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
We just function differently. Some of us are, like you said, pantsers and plotters.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm definitely a pantser.
And you know, if some of the students, you're probably wondering, like, what does that mean? That means by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just works. I don't know. I like it.
And if you pay attention to writing, such as you have to have your inciting incident, and you have to build to this, and then, you know, so on and so forth. You do pay attention to all of that.
Yes.
Not to say you don't, but you do. It's just that I just don't have an outline.
Right. Well, I try.
Yeah. I have a semi outline.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not strict about it.
Right. I will have something. I will have a guide. But
that's right.
I'm very flexible with the guide. And I think that's an important thing for a writer as well, is to be flexible. Because change is going to come.
Yeah.
They're going to come, and you can't do anything about that.
Well, I hope I'm giving somebody an idea or two, or in some way helped along the path of writing.
I've been taking some notes, and we have really focused in an area where I hadn't in the other conversations, and that really was the thinking outside of the box portion. I'm very, very appreciative of everything that you said with doing research and getting to know all of these different facets and aspects, and looking for new ideas, and dig in, ask questions, look for information, and don't just use the internet.
That's right.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I know that that's going to be very helpful insight for them.
I hope so.
I very much appreciate it, Carolyn. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me as well.
Yeah. So I look forward to meeting you in person.
Oh, I'll see you tomorrow night then.
Ma'am, you sure will. So we're going to go ahead and close. And again, thank you very, very much.
And keep writing. Everybody keep writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.